You probably know that SAP BTP is the platform optimized for SAP applications, bringing together application development and automation, data and analytics, integration, and AI capabilities. And today, we kick off the series SAP BTP DevOps and Observability in Action. A very warm welcome and thank you for joining. With me, I have my colleagues Torres Alijan, co-moderator of the series, and the experts Moritz Giesler and Boris Paska. But before introducing our expert, I would like to remind you that you have the possibility to ask our experts your questions, which will be answered at the end of the presentation. And now, before handing over to my colleague Torres for an update on upcoming sessions and introduction of our experts, I would like to share the entire upcoming series with you. Give me a second to share my screen. And here we go. So we have a great series lined up for you, starting with today's session, Unlocking the Potential of DevOps on SAP BTP, followed by a session tomorrow, also on YouTube, SAP Cloud ALM for SAP BTP operations, followed by 6 other sessions that will be only in Zoom, because they will be Zoom meetings so that you can really interact with our experts, ask your questions live on voice with your voice instead of posting your questions in the chat. So we look forward to seeing you in our other sessions as well, latest tomorrow. And with this, I would like to hand over to Torres for an update of upcoming events in April and May. Actually,
thank you, Tanya. Welcome everyone. My name is Torres Alijan. Thank you so much for joining us in this first of 8 episodes. Just wanted to let you guys know some upcoming events that we have coming up in April. On April the 25th, what's new with SAP BTP, the first quarter summary of what's new with SAP BTP. On April 30th, Rise with SAP AI webcasts, harness the full potential of business AI. And on May the 16th, we have a session inside SAP, discover how SAP's IT drives transformation and innovation. These are just a few of the webinars that we're currently planning. We've got a number of others being planned for April and May. Next slide, Tanya. And also, for those who don't know, we have a number of communities that we are currently running. I moderate the SAP BTP Garage Series, which is held the first Wednesday of every month. My colleague Peter Spielvogel runs the SAP Screen Personas Practitioner Forum. I do run the SAP Fiori Practitioner Forum, as well as the SAP BTP Practitioner Forum, and then the most recently added SAP Build Practitioner Forum. So if you're interested in joining any of those, I will put the links to those, as well as the links to the registration page for the upcoming events, as we move forward in the chat. Next slide, Tanya. I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our first speaker, Moritz Giesler, Product Manager. Moritz has started at SAP as a solution manager consultant and has worked in different projects focusing on change request management and test management and ITSM. Next slide, Tanya. And our second speaker is my colleague Boris Zarsky, product manager. As a seasoned product manager, Boris at SAP, Boris spearheads the DevOps narrative for SAP customers, leveraging SAP BTP, while also overseeing pertinent lifecycle management initiatives. I'd like you to welcome both of them. I'd like to hand it over to Boris to kick us off. Boris?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the very kind introduction. Let me just share my screen. Here we go. To both of you, Torres and Tanya, for having us, for organizing the series. And of course, I'm very excited to welcome you all to the first session of the webcast series. I'm And also want to thank my partner in crime, Moritz, for doing the session together with me, because when we thought about what could we offer, what value we could provide there, we realized that we did outline different aspects around the DevOps approach on BTP in previous webcasts, but we thought it's about time to really outline how this can work together with SAP Cloud ALM due to its special role it does play a central operations platform also for the SAP Business Technology Platform. And that's where we are today. So we thought that's a very good start into the series, because we can outline how the approach does look like, for which we will guide you through the different phases, and then, of course, make always the connection how that can work together. Of course, with a focus on what is possible already today, but we will also give some direction where we want to further evolve that. And that will then act as a very good starting point into the overall series from our point of view, complemented by tomorrow's session, then with a more focus on the operations part. But yeah, let's start with the overview. Really looking forward to our session together now. What it's all about to unlock the potential of DevOps on Business Technology Platform. I wanted to start, here we have the DevOps continuum. You might have seen in other occurrences already, where we just sketched the overall process coming from planning a change, where you have a corresponding business requirement, to actually coding it, meaning performing the development, and then performing building and testing as part of a dev cycle, before you then trigger the release towards production and the deployment into the production environments. And afterwards, make sure you do provide it with the right performance and availability in the operations phase. And then in the feedback phase, you gather further feedback that then results in further changes then, and you start a cycle all over again. Feedback, of course, can come up through all the phases, but here we have a dedicated one just to stress that. And in the next roughly 45 minutes, so that we still have time for questions afterwards, we will guide you now through all those phases and exactly point out how does our approach look like and how you can make the connection there with Cloud ALM to really have this holistic approach then. I want to start with this short slide on motivating again the DevOps approach in principle. I'm pretty sure many of you know that, but just to get everyone on the same page. And for that, I like to use this acronym forged by several experts around the movement. This acronym CALMS, where the C stands for culture. So that's really the important thing. And I like that it's really the first aspect here, because DevOps normally is not a product you can buy. It's really a different kind of thinking, where you have a positive failure culture established, and also make sure that it's okay to try things out, but to fail then early and often, and to retrieve corresponding learnings. So that's not something you tackle overnight. Nevertheless, of course, SAP BTP is intended to make it as easy, as smooth as for you to really make first steps, to gain first experience, and then build and evolve by time. And although it's an cultural approach, tools can nevertheless help you to tackle that. And that's also stressed by the next aspect here. A stands for automation, where you try to automate everything you can, be it testing, be it delivery, and also monitoring operations. That's, of course, also something you do not overnight. Also here you start small and then just expand based on experience and the feedback you receive and also the learnings that come up. Then L stands for lean. That's just stressing again the agile approach, where you try to avoid waste and have lean principles along the development approach you take. Followed by M for measurement, where you can only improve what you measure, because otherwise you do not know where to optimize. And here you can really get transparency on all kind of different aspects, be it how your delivery process does look like, but also how your product is used, or maybe which parts are not that used as you would expect to. And then, with that, just figure out how to optimize the whole offering and your whole approach as well. And finally, S stands for sharing, where you share success, but also failures inside your team, meaning you build up some kind of community ideally with your peers, with your teams, but also with other teams inside your company and also with other experts from the outside, like, for example, with other partners like SAP, for example. And it's really an open call to also collaborate, like, for example, on our SAP community, because we also depend on how our offering does fit your need in the end, right? And then where you can also improve or where you have other expectations in the long run. And I use this slide for another reason as well, because we are talking today about the integration of DevOps on SAP BTP with SAP Cloud ALM. And you see Cloud ALM, it already is part of the CALM's approach, right? Of course, that's not intentionally, but it's a real nice incident that this is the case, where we have CALM as part of the CALM's approach. So it's a natural fit. That's what we want to bring across, and that's what we are also working on. Okay, let's start here. And the first phase is planning. So for that, Moritz, how does it look like? How can SAP Cloud ALM support our customers in planning changes?
So thanks a lot, Boris, for handing over. So in the planning phase in Cloud ALM, it is like that we can offer there different options how you could handle it. Yeah. So we have in Cloud ALM a fully blown project and task management intent, right? So there you could take, for example, then as a starting point, a requirement, yeah, so that you could go in, but usually we are looking more to the user story part, right? So for DevOps, it's mainly the user stories that we are looking into and that we are working with. And of course, you can then as well break them down into several subtasks, yeah, so that you could distribute the work as well accordingly, so that that's all possible in Cloud ALM. And that's more for the implementation planning part, yeah, so that you could plan your implementation properly, yeah, so that you can delegate as well who needs to work on which topics. Yeah, so that's where you could use then Cloud ALM as the task management tool, the task management to plan your doings and your work accordingly. And what we have then in addition, we have a change and deployment management area. Yeah. So, and coincidentally, I am the product owner as well for the change and deployment management part in SAP Cloud ALM. So for us, it's there very important so that we have their features available. Yeah. And we went already for this terminology in Cloud ALM because we said at the end, yeah, it needs to go into the direction of having there some kind of a continuous feature delivery. And the idea is really that you have several user stories. Yeah. So where you describe at the end what needs to be done. But maybe there is one user story, yeah, so that would already fit so that you can deploy it as a feature at the end to your production stages later on so that it can be used by the end users. But it could be as well that you say, okay, we have maybe several user stories that would be combined and that need to get delivered so that they as a feature could then provide some additional value in the production systems to our end users. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the terminology, what we have there already in Cloud ALM, yeah, so that fits, I think, perfectly fine to the DevOps approach. And when we now look into the direction that we say, okay, we have there, of course, yeah, test cases in Cloud ALM in addition, yeah, so means test management. Yeah, you could say, okay, in the DevOps, yeah, usually you have then maybe the ICD pipelines, and there are a lot of tests running up front. Yeah, that's totally fine. But in Cloud ALM, for example, you could then combine it in a way with, let's say, test automation tools so that you can do an end-to-end testing as well, UI-based end-to-end testing. But it could be as well that you say, okay, we still have something like doing some smoke tests. Yeah? We still have some users looking at the end before we then really do a release, yeah, so that we can bring the changes to production. Yeah? So it's more like that you would like to have there, yeah, an additional option, yeah, to have their release approval, yeah, so that everything could go to a production stage. That's where the test management could come into the game in Cloud ALM, which can be used there. But that's not all, right? So we can see here in the top right corner, yeah, we have as well open APIs. Yeah? So with these open APIs, we have a lot of integrations available. So it means at the end for requirements, user stories, there are already APIs available in the Business Accelerator Hub. And that's already an option where you say, okay, we would like to integrate with maybe an existing tool chain. Yeah? So that would be one option that you could have. That would be the one thing. On the other hand, right, we could have then APIs for features and test cases. So that's planned still. Yeah? So for Q2, Q3, the first APIs will come there. So then there would be as well an option to say, okay, there would be as well maybe a starting point for us, let's say that we have any other backlog tools or whatsoever, but still, yeah, with the change management or deployment management part, we would like to have the integration. or for example, as well with the test management, we would like to have the integration. So we will have there kind of, it's just simple to use Cloud ALM in addition there. So that's at the end our utmost goal. We would like to have Cloud ALM as a simple tool that could as well be combined with your existing tool chain. But of course, we offer, as we can see here as well, the full chain so that you could start then with the requirements as an optional part and then go down the path with user stories and then delivering features that are properly tested in Cloud ALM to your production stages. So that's mainly the planning idea around Cloud ALM, where it could help to streamline everything. And when we now look at, okay, how does such a planning look like in Cloud ALM? So there we have a card view as well that comes very handy. So it's at the end on user story level. We see here as well how the status flow looks like. So it's pretty lean. So you have user stories in progress, blocked, done. At the beginning, of course, they are open. But here with the card view, you could then create something like a Kanban board, right? So that based on, we can see up here as well on the time boxes. So I will just maybe laser pointer once. We can see at the time boxes, so based on sprints or something like that, you could easily figure out, okay, what's still the upcoming work for the next sprint, where you can easily plan it. And then via the card view, you could then easily say, okay, there are things that are done. There may be a few things that are blocked where we need to look into, so that you can really easily manage as well your backlog in Cloud ALM. And that's where we think there it brings a lot of value as well, because it's lean and simple option as well to do your planning, your implementation planning. But on the other hand, you have as well options at hand so that you could integrate with an existing tool chain. And I think that's as well in the times where we have a lot of tools in the game, where there are a lot of integration needs available. I think this open API approach is definitely the right one. All right. Having said that, I would hand back to Boris for the next stages there.
Thanks a lot, Moritz. That already looks very promising. And when we now come to the actual code and build phase, that is then in the vein of DevOps, more straightforward, I would say. But nevertheless, I mean, we have also some ideas how we can bring that further together. Let me start here with the standard process. You might know from other approaches here shown on the example of SAP BTP, Cloud Foundry environment, where we have our developer teams that use, for example, the Business Application Studio, which is a web-based development environment for powerful development, especially around SAP use cases. And there they would perform the changes and then push the changes into a central Git-based repository. Here we are also open. There's no repository provided directly from SAP, as we see that rather as commodity offering, where we cannot bring much value, and where we see that many customers already made that choice. But here we smoothly integrate with that. And that pushing of the changes into the repository would then trigger some kind of continuous integration and delivery pipeline. Here on that example shown with the SAP Continuous Integration Delivery Service, which is a pipeline as a service offering. I will come to that in a minute. But also here we are open. You could, of course, use also third-party offerings around GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps or you name it, right? The important thing is for the approach that we really have that close and automated integration. Development comes up with the change, pushes them into the repository, and then triggers a pipeline that performs automatically test cases, be it unit testing, or it can also be some compliance checks and whatever, and provides that direct feedback again to the developer. Meaning you come up with a change, get feedback on the quality, and then can react out of the context on that feedback. And that's the game changer we see with the more agile approach compared to former releases where you did develop stuff and they then did pile up those changes in large releases, maybe released months later after you actually done the change. And if then something comes up, it's very hard then to figure out what went wrong. And here it's much more direct, and you have much tighter feedback loops. That's the driver we want to achieve also with our development. And After the changes have then been qualified, you can either directly deploy them with the pipeline, or, and here we are coming to the enterprise readiness we want to bring here, you hand it over into a controlled change and transport management process, where you have that additional control when it comes to propagating your changes towards production environment, and which also helps you to enforce company policies along that process. And here we have the SAP Cloud Transport Management Service as one of the options, and that could then be orchestrated by SAP Cloud ALM, where you have a central place, not only those changes coming from the SAP Business Technology Platform, but in a hybrid scenario, maybe combined also with changes in your backend system or from other platforms, and have that central control and have also the central place where you see all the different changes, and have also for auditing reasons that central transparency on what is going on in your complete landscape. For setting up this pipeline, I've mentioned before, we do bring this opinionated approach with the continuous integration delivery service. Here we just see our customer base twofold. We have customers that say, okay, yeah, we are on our transition to the cloud, and then business technology platform comes in, for example, to keep your car clean, right? And then they say, okay, if we now do enable or bring in cloud approaches, we also want to benefit from the modern development approaches, modern cloud development does bring. And that's exactly where we say, okay, here we want to have really offering with a very low entry barrier that allows you to verify and validate the approach, meaning you try out this automated pipeline for SAP scenarios, and then hopefully you learn, okay, it does really bring the value you hoped for. It does bring you more agility and a direct feedback channel. And then by the time you evolve and adapt as you need it, but then based on actual experience, compared to the other approach where you would try to figure out what you need right from the beginning, and you will spend months and months to figure out which tool chain to choose. And I promise in the end, you will nevertheless then face the requirement that your development teams comes and says, okay, that is nice, but yeah, here we need maybe something different. And we just want to turn it around. We do bring here an infrastructure provided by SAP with typical pipeline templates for typical SAP development use cases. So you really can end up with a running continuous integration pipeline in minutes. And then again, gain experience, verify the overall approach, and evolve as you go. And that's a product by SAP, meaning you also get direct support. On the other side, we have customers that say, okay, come on, DevOps is commodity for our normal non-SAP projects. Now we want to extend it also to SAP. We have already our tool chain in place. We already know what we are doing. Just tell us how we can bring in those SAP specifics into the existing approach. And for those customers, we have the project pipeline. And that's, again, rather for experienced customers or customers that want to build up that experience because they know already what they want to do, have already infrastructure in place, or know right from the start that they need full flexibility, like having special stages of the pipeline they want to come up with. And that's mainly learning. It's offered as an open source approach. You have to bring then your own infrastructure, which is okay if it's already in place. And we rather bring you like single Lego building blocks that allow you then to build your own custom pipeline, which is then owned by you, meaning there's no direct support for that from SAP because it's this open source approach. But we have many customers that also rely on that approach. For those of you who should already know the offering, I also wanted to bring in some of the latest news for continuous integration delivery. Here we have to place the situation that we have also here an increased pipeline flexibility option, which allows you also to break out of this opinionated path, not in full sense. We still want to have that low entry barrier, meaning the actual stages like a build stage, a deploy stage, validate stage, whatever, they are fixed. But inside the stage, you can script other tools if you have another tool chain in place or have other special demands. That's possible. That's what is meant here with this pipeline flexibility. In addition, the colleagues also did provide support for customer identity providers, which was also a requirement so that you can use technical users then also for the pipelines. Not mentioned here, but we have also an offering for ABAP on-premise development, be it in on-premise or in private cloud, with our Git-enabled change and transport system, which also allows you to store an ABAP code in Git-based repositories. Here, I also wanted to mention that also here, the colleagues have been working on providing more features like tags, dependencies, option to have activities performed in the background, and also an easier collaboration with Git repositories in terms of the users, so that you do not have a different configuration in your GCTS compared to the Git repository, but that is synced and so on. So I've linked corresponding blog posts if you want to learn more about it. But for those of you who should not have seen the continuous integration delivery service, I just want to spend 2 to 3 minutes to give you a short demo on that, because based on my experience, it's always easier to get the concept when you actually see it in action. Here I have an example demo account with different pipelines. The service is really simple. You just subscribe to it on the SAP Business Technology Platform, for which you can use cloud credits or pay-as-you-go approach, or have it as part of subscription. The actual service is pretty simple. You have 3 main parts shown here. One part is where you can securely store credentials, like, for example, for your Git-based repositories, so that the service can easily work with those repositories remotely, or for other services. Then you connect to Git-based repositories here under repositories. It's also pretty straightforward. You give it a name. You copy over the clone URL. You can directly copy over from your Git repository. Then you specify credentials if it's a private repository. If you should have your Git repository running in private cloud or in your own data centers, you can also specify the cloud connector. That is also not a problem. And then you can configure a webhook. Webhook just means whenever a change is submitted into a corresponding branch inside the Git repository, that then triggers the pipeline here running on the business technology platform. And you see here we are also very open. You can connect repositories from GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, Azure. No matter here for Bitbucket if it's an on-prem or a cloud repo. And the main part actually are the jobs. Jobs are the pipelines. And here you see that it's also pretty simple to set something up. You give it a name, you give it a description, you connect the corresponding repo you want to get triggered by. You can also specify here the branch, and you can also use wildcards, for example, if you say, okay, I have several feature branches, all starting with feature. All those shall trigger the single pipeline here to validate, and maybe another pipeline for your main branch, then that's also possible. And the main part we really see as key differentiator, let me just briefly scroll down so that you see it a little bit better, are here the pipelines. And you see here we have pipeline templates for the typical development use cases you do on SAP, be it performing or developing an extension on SAP Cloud Foundry environment of SAP Business Technology Platform. We have Kyma as another container-based, Kubernetes-based development environment. We have SAP Fiori development in Neo or on an ABAP front-end server. Of course, you can also perform Fiori development on Cloud Foundry, which is also covered by this pipeline, and integration suite. And what you then see is you have those different stages. Here you see some baseline configuration. You can do the configuration in a source code repository with a corresponding YAML config file. But here you can also use a job editor, meaning URI-based configuration. You specify the build here on the example of Java Node build, where you have different build tools. You can have directly performed static code checks. Here you can specify unit tests, malware scans. Then you can, as acceptance stage, perform a deployment and then perform WebDriver IO tests. You can have SonarQube scans. And then you have a release stage where you either perform a direct deployment or quite easily trigger a corresponding transport, where it just specify here the corresponding node and specify the service key of the transport management service. And here you can also switch on notifications then. And you see already, it's an opinionated pipeline. You see which stages are there. We have defined. We have also defined the tool chain, like here, for example, Sonar Cube scans. And yeah, with pipeline flexibility, you could now say, okay, I do not want to use Sonar Cube scans. I have another tool already in place, and then you could corresponding scripting to break out from that opinionated pipeline, but the stages would be the same. And actually, let me just briefly start one example pipeline. Here we have one that is connected also to SAP BTP via the Cloud Transport Management Service. And as mentioned before, you could perform the triggering via a change in GitHub. Here I want to directly trigger a manual run so that we just later on see corresponding results. Yeah, that's mainly the idea here. And now over to you, Moritz, to look what we have in terms of test automation.
Yes, so as Boris mentioned it already, right? So there could be a handover done then with the transport requests to a Cloud ALM, that we just saw. And when we now look into what we offer with Cloud ALM, we have the Tricentis test automation for SAP integrated with SAP Cloud ALM. And that's then the Tricentis test automation for SAP. And we can see here in this diagram what's possible at the moment. So when we look on the left-hand side, for an SAP S/4HANA on-premise landscape, for example, we could as well use the Tricentis test automation with the customer execution agents there. So that's possible already. If we look at SAP S/4HANA Cloud Public Edition, we have the SAP S/4HANA test automation tool that's fully integrated with SAP Cloud ALM. And the cloud execution agents, they are still in the planning. So they are not yet released. They should be available Q2, as far as I know from timeline perspective. And there we would like to, as well then, cover there from test automation perspective, SAP Ariba, SAP Fieldglass, SAP SuccessFactors, and as well more SAP solutions, on your cloud landscape. And I think there the Tricentis offering for test automation is very helpful, right? Because in this area, maybe you cannot really run with any pipelines or whatsoever. So means there the testing on the test automation is pretty valuable on the one hand, but as well when you have there, like Boris showed in the pipeline already, some testing steps in there in the test stages, right? It could still be that you say, okay, at the end, we would like to have there kind of an end-to-end automated test or whatsoever that could be automated with Tricentis, with the test script, and should be done then in Cloud ALM, for example, then based on a feature, so that you say you would like to deliver a feature, and that should be then as well the testing that needs to be done, so that you can run there these automated tests there. And what's in it for you, because Tricentis test automation comes together with SAP Cloud ALM, so means you have the option as well in the Cloud ALM tenant to request your Tricentis test automation instance directly from there. So it's out of the box there and easy to use. It's natively integrated, so means you could then execute test scripts from within Cloud ALM. You get as well the feedback, of course. So means there you can really have the full traceability by the integration there. And you can automate then browser-based UIs or APIs and integrations. Some GUIs still planned with the host cloud execution agents then for future. The usage rights, so it's included in the SAP Enterprise Support, so that's and as well in the cloud subscription, of course. It's for automated testing of SAP solutions as seen, and you have then 5 named users and can run 500 tests per month. So that's available in this offering. And provisioning, as mentioned, you can really directly request it via SAP Cloud ALM. The tenant, so the Tricentis test automation tenant will be there in around about 5 minutes, and it's automatically connected to your SAP Cloud ALM. So really the entry barrier is pretty low. So you can really start right away there as well with Cloud ALM and the test automation tools of Tricentis.
Excellent. So thanks a lot.
All right. Back to you, Boris.
Yes. After we have qualified the change, we have then the release. And for that, I've mentioned it before, we have here that approach where we say, okay, we want to differentiate between actually the development landscape, which is then based on actual continuous integration principles, meaning you have a highly automated approach with an automated pipeline that performs automated test cases and does provide this tight feedback loop where you can directly react on the quality of your changes. Managed and also owned by the DevOps team, meaning they are in charge of the pipeline. And for example, with SAP Continuous Integration Delivery Service, they can do that without much cognitive load. So it's really quite easy to own that pipeline. Again, with the goal to verify single developer changes. But as soon as you have qualified and came up with this qualified release candidate, you then hand it over into a delivery landscape. Then based on strict transport management rules like policies, schedules, who's allowed to perform changes, when are changes allowed to be performed, centrally managed by operations or approvers team or delivery manager. They are then with the goal to verify the release candidate, and where you normally have a manual process associated with where you say, okay, the delivery manager checks the situation and then it does approve that the change can now be propagated to production, and the decision is also stored inside the system for auditing reasons. And here, of course, change management capabilities come into play, where we have the option then to use those like being offered from SAP Cloud ALM to then orchestrate also the local tools. And yeah, here, example again, where we have the opinionated tool chain for the example of Cloud Foundry, but we have it also similar for other use cases. Important is that we have on the left side development and the pipeline with the different options, either our continuous integration delivery service or you use third party with Project Piper. Then hand over into transport management. That's also possible, for example, from an Azure DevOps pipeline with Project Piper. Also here we have corresponding pipeline steps that allow you to automatically trigger a transport out of your pipeline when all the qualifications are done. And yeah, integration with Cloud ALM then. Also here's some latest news for the Cloud Transport Management Service and the so-called SAP Content Agent service. Content Agent is a local service in the Cloud Foundry environment that can act as local agent and interplace then for the transport, which is a central service. Here we have enabled additional content types like SAP BTP ABAP environment, SAP Build with SAP Build Work Zone and process automation. We have also enabled the transport of SAP Analytics Cloud and SAP Mobile. And you can use the Content Agent service to also transport role collections, for example. Also, what we have enabled recently for the Cloud Transport Management Service are virtual nodes. So if you have, for example, a free system BTP account and want to connect it to a four-system backend environment, then you could add virtual nodes in CTMS, for example. I also want to stress, that we have sessions on those topics if you want to deep dive. As mentioned before, we want to provide you the overview today. And you see it's on the end of May. Here we have 2 sessions. It's always the concept that we do offer those 2 sessions. One is a deep dive lecture, where we will have several colleagues then that outline different topics, meaning we have one colleague that will outline continuous integration delivery, one will outline transport management, and we will then outline those in the small deep dive lecture, and that's followed then on the next day by a demo session where we really want to provide an end-to-end demo how everything plays together. With that, Moritz, over to you concerning the release.
Yeah, thank you, Boris. As we have seen beforehand, right? So when we do the handover from dev to ops, right? So that's where then as well Cloud ALM could help a lot, right? Because what we could think of is, so that you have your user stories that we saw at the beginning that you could create in Cloud ALM, right? And they will be assigned to sprints. So means based on a sprint planning, you can plan your implementation. So that's the idea around it. So that's your implementation planning, but it could be, of course, so that you say for some reasons, maybe the release of those changes to your production stages, that's still something that should be maybe withheld or held back in that sense. So that you could say later on, okay, we have there a concerted or orchestrated release to production. Yeah, and that's where then the features come into the game. Yeah, so it means the deployment of the features could really be planned based on the releases. Yeah, so as we can see here, the first 3 user stories, for example, they would be combined, clubbed together in feature 1. That means all the changes that are done there come together in the feature. And then you have at the end of release 1, a release delivery where you bring those features or this feature to production. And maybe the other 2 user stories, so user story 4 and 5 on the right-hand side, could go together into another feature that would go then with release 3. So you have there some flexibility, right? So that you could then really do kind of an implementation planning and could later on say, okay, in terms of delivery, for some reasons, maybe release notes missing, maybe some additional documentation or something like that needs to be done. You could still really decide, okay, when to release the things. That's why the idea behind it is really to kind of decouple the implementation planning and the release planning there. And that's what you can easily do with Cloud ALM. And when we go then into the deploy part, that's where we could say you could then easily go into this direction where you say you have a hybrid deployment. And it's illustrated or visualized like that. And I will show that as well in the demo later on how it could look like. You could have on the one hand your BTP part, and on the other hand, you have then maybe your own data center or something in the private cloud. And you have modeled both as kind of 3-tier landscapes. And when you now go into the direction of the data set of your own data center, you have the CTS, so CTS managed, so classical CTS managed. But on the other hand, on the BTP, you could use Cloud Transport Management Service, of course. But what Boris already shown, right? So the idea would be that we go there more into this direction in the dev area, in the dev space. We are using continuous integration, so that the developers get the early on feedback around what is going on. And only if you have then the full qualified build, it could be handed over to the Cloud Transport Management. And then at the end, the change and deployment management for hybrid transports could sit on top with SAP Cloud ALM. SAP Cloud ALM as well. On the BTP in Cloud Foundry, it's developed, right? So that's why it's on the BTP end, but it could orchestrate then as well the CTS transports. So that's the idea, so that you could really handle there those hybrid deployments and bring together the best of 2 worlds in that sense, right? Because we know it's not that easy, right, to combine, I would say, the classic CTS managed transport orchestration to, I would say, the new CI/CD approaches that are available there. Boris mentioned one additional option, looking into the direction of Git-enabled CTS. So that would be another option that we would like to bring then in future as well together, so that via Cloud ALM you have there as well then top an option to do some change orchestration there for, let's say, the CI and D service and stuff that is managed via maybe Cloud Transport Management in addition to a Git-enabled CTS. That's where I would come to the demo, just to briefly show you, okay, how could that look like? And there I give up the remote control and I will share my screen briefly. So just to show you how it looks like on Cloud ALM end. So, sorry, wrong one. So here we have in the Cloud ALM for implementation, we have the features area. And when we are looking at the features here, we can see here in the features overview, there are options that you easily could figure out, okay, what belongs to each other, right? And that's where, for example, you could go into the direction you would like to bundle via a release. So that would be one option, like shown beforehand, so that you easily figure, okay, those are the features relevant for me. I will work today with this particular feature that's an implementation. And here we can see there are 2 user stories assigned to it. So that's at the end the integration that we have, so that it could be integrated with the user stories. Both are done already. So that would mean now the transports need to be assigned there. So that's where we could then look into assigning transports from here. And there we can see we have there on the one hand, this transport coming from the pipeline. And we could have there, for example, as well, a transport request, a customizing transport request that could be assigned to the same feature. So that's the combination for this hybrid deployment. And when we now save it, so that's where you could then combine, I would say, this feature delivery to the test stages. So both modeled as a 3-tier landscape. So the one transport here would go into 012-100. So that's the customizing on S4 end, for example, on your S4 on premise. And here you have then something for a BTP application where you did some text changes and an icon change or something. and then it will go to the open sub QA tenant managed via CTMS. And to hand it over to test, you can simply click on deploy, and then the deployment is scheduled, for both the solutions. So for the S4 on-premise on the one hand, and as well from CTMS, and then for your BTP app. And that's how you could easily synchronize it. Then you can hand it over to test, and that's where then, for example, Tricentis test automation could come into the game. So that would be the idea, how you could handle it. And of course, you have then later on as well approvals for production that you can give here in the feature, so that you have then as well a handle to somehow steer or control your approval for the production. All right, that was the short demo that I would like to share. And with that, I would hand back to you, Boris.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Moritz. Just let me again see on the screen. Here we go. So, after we've performed that, let me see. Now we would come to the operations phase, where we say, okay, now you want to provide that deployed application with the right performance and availability. And not surprisingly, here we have an approach that also does work together with SAP Cloud ALM. On the platform, we have different use cases. We have listed it here as two categories. One is platform as a service, where you just use the different services to come up with own custom applications on the different runtimes, be it Cloud Foundry or Kyma and so on. And we have also some more software as a service offerings like SAP Analytics Cloud or SAP Integration Suite, where you use an application provided by SAP for your business purposes then. And both expose telemetry data, of course. And in principle, when it comes to operating applications, it's about two things. One is about problem detection. So you have to get aware when an issue does come up. And problem resolution, meaning making sure that you perform the right actions to get it back on track. And for problem detection, we have an approach of a central observability, where we say, okay, we want to use SAP Cloud ALM as unified central monitoring, alerting, and analytics platform, where you then can reduce accordingly mean time to problem detection. And that also makes sense, especially in the SAP environment, because you might have those overarching scenarios. And it's important not only to have a isolated view on one of the bits that is part of your solution, but really to have the holistic end-to-end view and say, okay, the whole application is fine. Or when an issue comes up and you see, okay, there's maybe a performance degradation or whatever, that you can directly dig down and say, okay, that is happening in the backend part or in the part on BTP or in the other part, and that you can really then involve that. And that's also what we want to do, that we also allow a context-sensitive navigation then to actual problem resolution using then local observability. They can then perform root cause analysis, for example, then using corresponding services locally on the business technology platform. And just to stress that, we have, of course, a lot of different capabilities on SAP Cloud ALM. No worries, we won't go through that in this session in full detail, because we have a very good session tomorrow. I will come to that in a minute. But what we do have on Cloud ALM are different capabilities for problem detection. You see here on the left, and that's all kind of monitoring, be it for the business process, be it for exceptions or integration flows, be it for user monitoring, how you see how your application is behaving and used, or for example, health monitoring. And via this intelligent event processing, we have then here some kind of capabilities around problem resolution with central alerting, notifications, but also operations automation, for example. And here you see a roadmap, especially for BTP. Again, we won't go through that here in that session, but just to give you an idea that we have a very, very healthy coverage already today. And for certain scenarios, we have a corresponding roadmap. So I've linked also the corresponding expert portal for more information around that. But again, tomorrow we will have the second session, which will dig deeper into that topic here. And you have also listed that here, that's SAP Cloud ALM for SAP BTP operations, where we exactly outline how Cloud ALM can work and enable corresponding SAP BTP operation scenarios, where we have our colleague Stephanie talking about the topic in more detail. What I nevertheless want to stress are some latest improvements. We see here we have Cloud ALM as central operations platform also for SAP BTP. If you want to learn more, here's a corresponding interview as well. And this central operations platform does work then with some local services. For example, here we have the SAP Alert Notification Service, which then allows you to subscribe to events from the platform. Here, for example, we have enabled delivery of events from SAP Shop Scheduling Service. Then we have, for example, the SAP Cloud Logging Service, which is a successor of the Application Logging Service, which allows you to also centrally store, visualize, and analyze application logs from different runtimes of the business technology platform. And we have the SAP Automation Pilot Service, which allows you to automate recurring operations tasks, for which we do provide catalogs of commands around typical DevOps use cases, be it around handling your application or performing root cause analysis or alert remediation and so on. And here we came up with some latest capabilities like improved scheduling, account setup, update of SAP HANA Cloud. And we have also a beta version of an Gen AI-based command assistant, so which allows you to use natural language then to create your new commands. That's something we wanted to stress. And all those topics will also be covered as part of our webcast series. That's the good thing. You see, we have those two blocks, one about logging and alerting with Cloud ALM and BTP in interplay. That will start mid of May with, again, 2 sessions, one deep dive lecture around the overall approach, the different tools, but also a session about how you can instrument your custom application so that it can also then come up in corresponding monitoring in Cloud ALM. Followed then by an end-to-end demo session again on the interplay of the different tools. And the second block is around operational efforts, automation with Cloud ALM, SAP Automation Pilot, and Terraform provider for SAP BTP. Again, one deep dive lecture with 3 experts around those 2 topics, each roughly 20 minutes, with your option to really engage with the experts in the Zoom session, bring up your questions and so on. And then followed on the next day with an, again, end-to-end demo session. Okay, with that, we are able to really have the different means to provide the application on BTP. And again, important is really that we have those local observability tools. On the other side, we have the central observability with Cloud ALM. And for example, when you think of cloud logging, you can see issues in health monitoring of Cloud ALM, and then from Cloud ALM directly deep dive into Cloud Logging Service to perform the root cause analysis. That's how the interplay is meant. But now over, Moritz, to you to take a look at our final phase.
Yes, perfect. So the final phase here in the DevOps continuum is at the end the feedback. Yeah. So there we are looking mainly at, and you maybe thought about it already, or you could think about it. So it's about the APIs as well. Yeah. So we see here which options we have with Cloud ALM. Yeah, but as well, always the extensibility is a very important part. Yeah. So we have APIs for the BTP on the one hand, but we have as well APIs for third-party tools. Yeah. So, but as we saw already, the options that we have in the operations area that were shown, yeah, where we have the logging options, yeah, where we have as well via a notification service, some options there as well. You could think of that via APIs, you just easily steer in the end that you add there some additional project tasks in that sense. Yeah, it would be then user story, a project task, or maybe a defect that you could think of. Yeah, so in Cloud ALM, so those could be as well then triggered through APIs. So that would be then kind of the feedback channel. But of course, as already mentioned, there are a few other ones that are available on the BTP end that could be as well utilized. So, but incoming channel in Cloud ALM could be then the already mentioned options or business objects that we've seen at the beginning, and then you could as well really further go down the road with the planning and as well then later on with the implementation and the release plan. Yeah, so that's simple how the feedback loop could look like, how you could close at the end. And if we look at the short summary, we just can go along this offering around the DevOps continuum. Once again, what we've seen, Cloud ALM offers there as well options via user stories and sprints, to plan at the end accordingly what should be done. With the code options, so in the code phase, it's about creating your changes and then pushing them to your central source code repository at the end, for example, via Business Application Studio, and then via the continuous integration and delivery service, right? The pipeline will be triggered, so build will be qualified, and then when you get maybe and the best way, of course, a qualified archive, right, could be handed over, and then you have maybe options in Cloud ALM, for example, as an application lifecycle management tool to put some test automation, for example, on top. But of course, you could as well use some simple manual testing, so that you do then there's some acceptance testing before you do then later on the release. So release means at the end you would approve those changes then for production. So you can orchestrate them in Cloud ALM together with the cloud transport management as shown via releases. You could easily orchestrate that part, and then you can trigger the deployment based on a feature in Cloud ALM. Means there you could then synchronize the deployment to production as seen in the demo as well. So in a hybrid way if you want to. Boris went into the topics of operations, but there will be as well good webinar sessions in future. But just to mention a few things, there are a lot of monitoring options available in Cloud ALM, how you could monitor the stuff, analyze what's wrong, and then as well think about, okay, how could we fix the root cause in the best way as well, automate at the end the operations part there properly so that the fixes are as well kind of automated. And then you could, in the feedback part, you could collect your issues, for example, via defects, or you can then just push additional user stories so that you could then as well in Cloud ALM, if you want to then do kind of your backlog management. So that's the idea around it. And having said that, we are at the end, and briefly handing back to you, Boris, regarding what's there as additional information.
Right. I mean, we compiled some links for you here, of course, again, to the webcast series. Again, it's a very good opportunity to really get the overview and also deep dive into the session where you can really bring also your questions to our experts. And we have over 10 experts as part of the series for you available. Then the links to SAP Cloud ALM for implementation, like shown by Moritz today, and SAP Cloud ALM for operations, where we have the dedicated overview lecture tomorrow. Then here the link to the REST APIs also outlined by Moritz. For DevOps in general with SAP, we have a community page and a help page for the DevOps with BTP approach with a corresponding learning journey. And I've also linked some recordings from TechEd. But now I would say use the time. I mean, here's also our contact information. You can also reach out to us afterwards. But we still have some minutes time for questions. I could not check now the chat, but let's see if there are any questions available. Let me just stop sharing so that you can see us better. Here we are.
Great. Thank you so much for this excellent and very clear presentation. Yes, we have questions in the chat especially from someone from Sydney. He stood up in order to ask his questions to you. I will definitely take his first. So let me take the first one. I have to join and stress the issue of no possibility of adding my partner, Calm, to my client systems. Every customer required to set up its own Calm, which reduced my economics of scale. Not a question, but maybe you can comment that. Is there a way to make it easier?
So at the moment, it's really like that you have there at the end of per customer number, you get your Cloud ALM tenant. Then there is at the moment really no option to somehow, I would say, orchestrate it in a way that you do it on partner level. There are already a few partner options available so that they could use their own partner Cloud ALM tenants and then kind of get the information from several customer tenants, for example, so that you could do kind of a collaboration there. But of course, we know that there are still some gaps in that area, and there will be as well options in future to somehow add additional tenants then, for example, per customer number. That still would not most likely fix that issue, but I can only say we are looking into these topics, and I cannot promise anything, but it could be that in future we will have there as well additional options so that partners could then manage accordingly, and you get there some kind of better integration, I would say, with partner tenants, or that partners could manage something on your Cloud ALM tenants probably.
Thank you. The next one, does this approach mimic Solman focused build and general change, etc.? So we could pack documentation as well as the code.
That's the idea. Yeah, so that's the plan, to go into that direction. So for solution manager, I would say when we're looking at change request management, that's exactly where Cloud ALM with change deployment management is heading to. Now we are still at the beginning. Yeah, so if you're looking at solution documentation or things like that in solution manager, we are not yet there, but we will offer options further down the road, 2024 already. When we are looking at focus build, there we have as well an initiative in Cloud ALM, so that via additional constraints, yeah, so we call it kind of project status switches, so configuration switches, we would like to offer there as well a more streamlined way, yeah, like you know it from focus build, so that you could use Cloud ALM as well for this purpose.
Great, thank you. Very quickly, Taurus, do you see another question in the chat?
Yeah, I see one around the continuous integration delivery service, if it only supports cloud developments. Right now, we have, for example, the option also with the Fiori being deployed to another front-end server. We are also evaluating to extend the use cases towards Git-enabled change in transport system, because we also see that as a natural fit. So, of course, that's a moving target. I mean, we are evolving the scenarios and also thinking about coming up with further scenarios around SAP S/4HANA private cloud. That's true. I cannot tell you now a concrete roadmap, but yeah, that is under discussion. We have also a customer engagement initiative where we also do evaluate the corresponding requirements around that.
Okay, so we still have a couple of questions, but we are on top of the hour. Maybe we can take one or two
Cool.
From the chat.
Yeah, cool. I mean, maybe I just continue with the next one, right? Also around continuous integration delivery service, if it can be used also with SAP HANA XSA on-prem. That depends a little bit on the actual setup. If it's part of an MTA and so on, there should be possible options out there. But you can also reach out to me via email if you like, Pradeep. That would be appreciated, and I can make the connection then with the colleagues, and we can clarify that offline if you like.
Great, thank you. Next one, and then I think we should stop.
Right. SAP Cloud ALM, is it possible to set up for SAP Business Integration, iFlows, API management? In principle, yes. I mean, there are monitoring scenarios available, right? Also in terms of, yeah, if it's about the delivery context, we have a pipeline available. There's also a part of the continuous integration delivery service, but there we do not have yet the integration into transport. Nevertheless, there's also Project Piper and corresponding blog posts, how you can use that for integration suite. And there you could, in principle, then also have the handover into transport, and with that, the handling via Cloud ALM.
Great,
same is true for API management. Sorry. Yeah, that was the part of the question. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Taurus, do you have some final words?
Yeah, thank you guys for another great session. A lot of tremendous value in what you presented. Hopefully, our participants have most of their questions answered, maybe provoked a couple of new ones. I have put Boris's and Moritz's contact information in the chat. So if you want to reach out to them, please do feel free to reach out to them. I've also included Tanya's and my contact information in the chat as well. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any issues with registering in any future of the webinars. And with that, back to you, Tanya.
Great. Thank you. Have a great day and a great evening, depending on where you are. And we definitely look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
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 Thanks a lot.